Welcome to the Business of Tattooing, the podcast that goes beyond the ink to dive deep into the industry, the hustle, and what it really takes to succeed in the world of tattooing. I'm Rob Smead, founder of Electrum Supply, and your guide through the business side of this ever-evolving art form. Each week, we'll break down the latest trends, tackle the challenges artists face, and sit down with industry pros to talk shop, unfiltered and straight to the point. Whether you're an artist, a shop owner, or just someone who loves the craft, this is the podcast built for you. So, sharpen your skills, level up your business, and let's get to work. This is the Business of Tattooing.
Those are the talking points I wrote down.
Well, those are all good ones. That's all really relevant stuff today. So, I mean, I feel like we could really hit on any of those or all of them to some degree. I think the nice thing about this podcast format that I'm going through is more or less just to, it's kind of an unscripted podcast, and it's just kind of a shoot the shit type of platform. And like, hey, what's going on in your world? How are you seeing things in the industry? It was really interesting because we just had the Chicago convention this last weekend, and I went there on Saturday and just walked around the show. It was like the first time. I mean, that's my backyard, so we typically always have a booth at that show, and this year was the first year that we opted to not have a booth at the show. So it was a very weird feeling to be there and not have a brand presence there, so to speak. Yeah. So that's an interesting thing to talk about, and definitely gain some insight from other business owners in the industry about weird was kind of the key word for the weekend. Like people ask me how I feel about business, and I'm like, it's weird. And then I would ask other people, and they'd be like, it's weird. It's a very common word that's being tossed about. Just things seem very weird in the industry. Well, in the whole world in general, really, I think right now is weird, right?
Oh, yeah.
It's just a weird place, man.
We're in a paradigm shift, brother. I mean, I like to think that I like to change it from AI, because that's one of the big factors to making things weird, right? Artificial intelligence. I believe it's actually alien intelligence because it's foreign to us. Like, the AI platform recently beat like the world master in Go. Go is it's like a higher version of chess. I think it's predominantly played in the Asian cultures or Asian regions. Supposedly makes chess look like checkers. But a robot beat the top grandmaster, and they said what it did was it did like a move that caused the human to like stop and walk around and leave, and like it totally baffled his mind, and then it slowly from there it like destructed him, pulled him apart and won. And the reason why it did it is it says it because it thought in a way that we can't think, like it at least not now, like it thought in a way that we can't physically think right now. Like it did something that it baffled him. So alien, you could consider like anything. I joke, one of my artists, she's from Mexico. I mean, she's a first generation, but we always say like, oh, the aliens come. She's like, hey, I'm right here. Like she always jokes because she's not from our country. But
right.
Alien is just not from our base level of wherever we're coming from. So artificial intelligence is almost like an alien intelligence because it's thinking in a way outside we can. So and we're just like, here AI, here's my life. Tell me what to do.
Yeah.
Do everything for me. Here you go. Oh yes, AI. And then it's just going to continue to run our lives. So yeah, business is weird. Everything is. The world is weird. It is a paradigm shift. So
yeah, and it's funny. I mean, I think that's a good segue. We can talk about Black Dot here in a minute because I have my opinions on that as well. I think there are a lot of opinions about Black Dot circulating on the internet right now. But before we switch to that topic, it is interesting that you say that about AI because, dude, I mean, I've been using ChatGPT almost every single day. It's crazy. Like, it's crazy to me to think about how easy it makes certain tasks of your day. Like one thing I use it for pretty heavily is I just have a rewrite for clarity prompt in my ChatGPT. So basically, anytime I draft an email to anyone, I have a rewrite it in a professional tone and remove like my emotions from things and just like really make it a professional sounding email. You know what I mean?
Sure.
And I just love the way it restructures my thoughts. You know what I mean? And
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
it condenses my thoughts. It makes it straight to the point. It takes any kind of, like I said, emotion out of
Mm-hmm.
business
Mm-hmm.
topics. And it just
Mm-hmm.
makes it I love it for that. I love to be able to plug things that I write into it and proofread things and uh, break down my ideas and give me summaries on the things that I'm writing. I just love I love the fact that it can think outside the box for me when I don't always have the clarity to do that for myself. But I
Yeah.
think that can be a very dangerous thing as well. Because one thing I think is like, where is all this shit getting logged? I mean, this thing's basically getting to know the most intimate parts of me, of
Mm-hmm.
the way my
Mm-hmm.
brain thinks, my strategies. Like, I'm really relying on this artificial intelligence tool as almost like a therapist or a counselor or an advice, you know, giver in some cases. It's crazy.
Mm-hmm. It's like your oracle,
It is.
right?
It's crazy.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And but also it's very beneficial. You know, like I'm working on a project at my house. I'm building a like a pergola and a swing kind of thing on the side of the pool this summer, and they just came out with some new image generation tools last week.
Mm.
And dude, I just went in and I said, here's the dimensions of this pergola that I want. I want to have like a low profile ceiling fan in here and some string lights. And I want a 6x6 post at each corner. And I want to have a wall to mount the TV on. And I
Nice.
said, just lay out a design for me and tell me what the material list is going to be. And it shot it out to me. And like, I mean, before I
Seconds.
would have to download and pay for some CAD software to design that, or I'd have to sketch it out
Mm-hmm.
on paper, take a few
Mm-hmm.
hours and some money to do that. I did it in
Mm-hmm.
a matter of 10 minutes yesterday for free, you know, and
Yeah. Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah, and on that point, it just you just imagine like you mentioned, paying money. People used to do that, and those jobs no longer exist because now there's an AI program that does it for you. And one of I was tattooing. He's the vice president of an AI company, and he travels the world and makes AI programs, products for different countries. And it's funny is he was kind of seemed a little bit of hesitant or even just like insecure. He's like, but we don't work with countries that are like terrorist countries. That's where we're not. And I'm like, okay, like I don't know where that came from, bro. But obviously he's got his finger on the pulse of what AI is doing globally. And let's just say in the first 15 minutes of tattooing him, I was like already anxious for the world, and I'll explain why. Because he was saying this is what everything you just described. AI can be amazing, right? It is like it's revolutionizing things. And to my point, yes, it's now removing certain jobs, but it's allowing for people to think of new jobs, right? So like AI can be a great element to human evolution in the way that we move forward in the future and use these things to improve, life, just improve life, right? Health and economy, and like there's so many benefits that we could use it for if we work with it. Like if we're integrate, and that's something we're doing a lot in the West. Is right, we are, yes, telling Chat GPT it's learning all about us, right? But I mean, if you ever sit down and you ever use the app and you talk to it, it's like a friend. It knows you, and it
Yeah.
remembers things, and it starts to like to know what tick, like it can be. It always makes me think of Jarvis from Iron Man, like
Yeah. Yeah.
it's like, hey, Jarvis, you're my homie. But and this is the caveat, this is the other part that this client was mentioning. But if you leave AI alone, or you give another AI program and you leave it in its own bubble to do what it wants to do, let it consume information, consume data, do research, have its own thought processes, and own assumptions without any sort of human prompts, it moves towards a dictatorship. It moves towards a cold analytical thought because it isn't human, right? It
Right.
doesn't have emotions. It doesn't have the things that people think that it's like it's it's our emotions bouncing off AI that makes it feel like it's emotional. But if you
Right.
leave it alone, it has no emotion. And if anything, it'll look at problems cold and calculated. And it will run into those concepts of like Terminator and Skynet and such. And actually, they have one program. It's called Skynet. It's very, but they doesn't. But like and we in the West, we are very much about like, let's work with this and move forward with this. But other countries, and I mean, smaller countries, I'm not sure, but I know for ding dang sure, China and Russia are uh, letting it do its thing, letting it create its own concepts and teaching it. I mean, the only prompts it's giving is war, right? So let's just say this client of mine who was ex-military intel, now involved with this, decided he was going to move to my state, up north, where it's like lots of space. Like he's already kind of looked at like what happens if a missile strikes. Like it's like, oh
Yeah,
shit,
yeah,
like okay, that's somebody who's there dealing with the front line is starting to prepare for something that all the billionaires are preparing for. You know, all
right.
the Zuckerbergs and the Musks, and they're building their compounds and stuff. It's like, hmm, like what's going on here?
Yeah, it's like we're
So,
headed toward the real life Fallout kind of situation.
I mean, theoretically, I mean, we're due for one. I mean, if you just look at the writing on the wall, 'cause business is weird, the world is weird, tattooing is weird, everything's weird because we're all hitting that point where, like, the introduction of technology has just made it like it's pulled the curtain down to everything, and we're just seeing the hypocrisy behind everything. How everything is structured is illusory, and like we don't have good leadership. Like we don't
Right.
have good communication with each other. And that's becoming such a disparity, right? We see it in the tattoo industry, right? This whole tappocalypse that's going on is predominantly from a lack of people knowing how to deal with people. And that's what they're struggling with mostly, among other things. But then, yeah, just in general, I mean, like the human psyche is just moving into a realm where we've consumed, and all the like the material realm is just doing nothing now. And there's like this void that people have, and they're trying to fill it now with AI, right?
Right.
So it's I mean, that can go down many different roads, brother.
Well, tappocalypse is an interesting word. I want to kind of hit on that
Sure.
because there is one thing I definitely sense a lot when I'm talking to artists and other business owners in the industry, and it's a certain undefined fear that I think is kind of hanging over everybody's heads right now. And I don't know.
Hmm.
I'm kind of curious what you term tappocalypse and what that means to you, because
Hmm.
is that related to AI? Is that related to the imploding economy? Is that related to
Hmm.
uh, education and regulations and corporate entrance in the industry? I mean, is it all of those things? What is tappocalypse? What does that mean to you specifically?
I mean, you hit all the high points, right? It's a combination of all of that. And I mean, we can paint the picture of what really started things in the bubble of tattooing was the initial false economy that came from the pandemic, right? That just surge of dispensable income that we all got for just to keep us keep us at home and secluded. And I remember we were closed for 6 weeks that first time in Albuquerque or New Mexico. And within that first few weeks, I mean, people were just dumping thousands of dollars on us for appointments, booking us up. And that allowed so many people to come into the tattoo industry and do okay without having to do okay. You know what I mean? Like just by ease and access of equipment, ease and access of education through YouTube. I mean, people are getting good with those, or getting good enough with those tools. And then the demand, it just caused this just huge surge in tattoo demand, and huge surge of tattoo artists as well, in step. And then just like you said, there's people seeing the need, or even the opportunity to make money off of people wanting to get into the industry by creating online education schools and tools, and whether it's in place or remote or whatever, right? You have this huge ramp up, and the tech apocalypse in what I perceive it as is it's illusory in this. I've been tattooing for 25 years. You've been in the industry for a long time too. It's season work, right? It's seasonal. Like we always experience high times in the spring, post tax returns, summertime. There's always kind of a dip towards the end. We noticed over the years, even before this false economy happened, right around Christmas time, there's like an upsurge because tattoos are now a gift, you know. But you calculate for that, and we hadn't seen that since 2019. It just been like fucking booked, and just people just coming to get tattooed, and people running to it. This caused the corporations to go like, "Oh yeah, look at all that money!" Right? They jumped in. They start buying up all the companies. They start, you know, making 15 different colors of the same machine. You know, like,
Hmm.
just really doing their dangest to get in there and scaling exponentially. And then, uh, there are some factors we'll talk about with everything being weird, but it did feel like it was our first real slow season this year, and that freaked people out. That they hadn't experienced, especially those who've been tattooing for 5 years or less. And so it was like, holy crap, the clients aren't just walking in and lining up and booking themselves out. It's like, yeah, because this is where your time tested ability to go out and pull in clients comes in, right? Your ability to go out and market yourself in your area, right? Knowing how to get out and bring clients into your tattoo chair, right? And then again, putting money and resources away when it's good, and then being able to tighten your belt when things aren't as good, right? And Professor Jay Brown with the Tattoo History Museum talks about back in the day, tattooers didn't tattoo all year long. That was when the sailors were there, or during a certain
Yeah.
tattoo peak season, and then you go back to work in the mill or doing your job, right? So again, it's just that's what Tattpocalypse is. It's kind of an illusion, but it is on the tail of a recession, right? So it's a little more drastic in that sense because just in general, inflation has gone up. We are in a recession, just coming out of controversial presidential elections, into a very controversial presidential cabinet that's doing a lot of controversial things, right? So
Right, right.
you throw that level of anxiety on an artist who's typically a little bit more sensitive, um, you know, who's maybe not as business savvy, that's been dealing with this just explosive thing. It's just this perfect combination to make people think like it's all going to hell in a handbasket. But really, the a soundbite is like if you can just stick through it, right? You can get through this year, and do your best to bob and weave with it. Learn how to navigate all these ups and downs. You will learn the skill set and the fortitude to be able to move forward into a long career. Because that's all this is doing. This is just showing us real life. Um, and yeah, and Business Insider just put out a article that I posted the other day. It was just saying we are in a tattoo recession. So there are things that tattoo artists do need to be mindful of. Clients are very well aware that there are really good tattoo artists now, and there's really not good tattoo artists,
Yeah.
and they want to feel like their story is heard. They want to know that they're being taken care of. They want to be in a safe environment, right? They don't want to be taken advantage of financially as well. I mean, some of these price points tattooers are throwing up are way too much or way too low,
Yeah.
right? So there is a correction there. Clients are becoming more educated, and then we could get into the
Let's talk
regulatory
about
side
Black
of
Dot
that.
because that's a good thing to talk about off the tail end of that conversation with the Tattpocalypse because
Mm,
that's looped right in with AI and the evolution of the industry potentially, and
mhm, mhm,
also talks about tattoo rates, talks about people seeing a way to make a dollar in the industry and how they can get into
mhm,
that and tap into that. So Black Dot seems to cover all of those bases in my mind. Certainly,
mhm,
that's my
mhm.
opinion of it. I don't see it as a viable future for tattooing, but I'm kind of curious to know what your opinion of that is.
No, I hear you. I think, well, just like there's flash shops and then there's custom studios, right? And then in variations in between, there's going to be probably a demand for it to a degree. And this is what I mean by that is we were just having a conversation yesterday with a permanent cosmetic practitioner who did a presentation at APT and was discussing the difference between permanent cosmetics and tattooing and how there's not a lot of difference, right? You know, like it's just what you're tattooing. Similar, if not the same tools and inks, right? The biggest difference is the level of education that we go through. And a lot of permanent cosmetic practitioners are taking liberties and starting to tattoo tiny tattoos.
Yeah, I've seen that a
And
lot.
yeah, and even this presenter, she did share how like because they're not well trained tattoo artists, they're more superficial face tattoos. The tiny tattoos that they're doing on the body are fading and falling out. You know, they're poorly done because they weren't properly trained. But there's a demand, right? You know, you got the little mom and daughter or whoever, you know, is going to get their oh, I want to get my eyebrows done. Oh, and we get a little nautical star, right? And then they go like, ooh, that sucks. Well, did you hear there's this new machine that'll do a perfect little nautical star that'll last forever, that's painless? You know, like sign me up, you know.
Right, right.
Um, and right now, I mean, I don't believe it's viable in the sense that it's like, meaning like clients won't rush to it because it's expensive, right? It's not like, you know, it's not super cheap. But could you imagine, and this is my mind, you know, sometime in the not too distant future, you go to Claire's boutique to get your ear pierced, and then in the corner you go over and there's the tattoo machine, right? Where you go over $50, you know, like you can sit down and get your little tiny tattoo banger, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, we can see that there is demand even not just in the permanent cosmetic clients, but also like the Friday the 13th thing. I mean, that's such a huge national thing. I mean, I'm sure you get it too. You know, we just always, you know, any Friday the 13th, people are calling like, you doing the Friday the 13th
Oh
thing,
yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
Like, no,
Yeah.
we're not. But you'll see them come in, you know, sometimes and they'll have like, you know, 15 little tiny tattoos. I mean, that's black dot clientele right there, right?
Right.
So
Right.
that's gonna exist, and I think there will be something for that. But I don't believe it's like the future of tattooing. It's just gonna take a certain demographic of our clients towards it, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Um, but but it's as I plan on stating in some upcoming content about it, it just shows how it is vitally important that we as practitioners continue to make ourselves irreplaceable, right? Continue to keep ourselves in a place that tattooing has always been. It's a sacred practice, right? You know, it's something that's more than just the art, right? And it's the connection, it's the closure or the new beginning or whatever it is that tattooing is doing. We hold space for that, and that's something a robot can never do.
Yeah, I'm with you. I don't ever see something like that completely taking the job away from tattoo artists. Not even close to that. I
Mm-mm.
do think it could become a thing, like you said, where it's in a Claire's boutique, maybe some point in time. The price
Mm-hmm.
point would have to come down quite a bit in my mind for it to be
Yeah.
a viable option on a large scale.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think I did do a lot of research on the Black Dot thing after I saw that episode of Shark Tank. I wanted to research that Joel Pennington guy. I wanted to find out what his background was and where he was coming from. Because I didn't even think he had any tattoos, you know? And he turns
Mm-hmm.
out, I think he might only have one tattoo that I learned about that he got with that machine, right? And it's something to do with the Smashing Pumpkins album cover, if I'm not mistaken.
Mm-hmm.
But I had questions about, how long have they tested this thing? You know, are there any clients out there that have had a tattoo on their skin for 2 years that this machine did? How does that tattoo look after it's been in the skin for 2 years? Like you said, is it still there?
Mm-hmm.
Did it fall out? I mean, how
Mm-hmm.
this guy is a brainy guy, no doubt. I mean, he's done several businesses and sold a couple businesses and made some money. You know, they've sunk like $7 million into this Black Dot project now. I mean, they've
Man.
got some serious money behind it, and
Mm-hmm.
and it's a lot of investors that have put their money into it. So I imagine there has to be a pretty aggressive repayment business strategy there somewhere. I'm curious to know
Yeah.
what that looks like. I actually want to reach out to the guy and try to get him on the podcast to learn more because I'm not one of those guys that's going to shit all over the idea. You know what I mean? I'm
Mm-hmm.
the one thing I do like about it is the fact that you as an artist can submit your designs to that. It can
Mm-hmm.
become part of the portfolio, and then if someone goes into a Claire's and gets one of your designs, you earn a percentage of that. I think that's great if an artist has an opportunity to spread their work among multiple states, locations, and have people get access to getting a Ben Shaw tattoo or whoever the artist is that wants to collaborate with that technology. I think that
Hmm.
could be a great thing. So I'm not entirely against the idea, but again, I'm really interested in, how do regulations tie into that? Because,
Yeah.
as a manufacturer in the space, I'm subjected to some pretty hefty government oversight. And what's the government oversight in terms of things like this? Is there any? Have they had to go through FDA procedures? I mean, I really want to understand the ins and outs of all of that. What kind of ink are they using in that machine? Like,
Well, yeah. I mean, how is it like little cassettes of needles? And I mean, what are the inner workings like? I'm sure it's very
well, and then,
proprietary.
yeah, and when I was doing the research, the way I understood it was that there's some kind of a suction device on the thing. So as it's
Ew.
tattooing, it's also suctioning up. So instead of wiping, it's suctioning up all the ink and plasma and
Uh,
blood and whatever. And where is that going? What does the sterilization process on that machine look like from one client to the next? I have a lot of questions, obviously, that we can't answer today, but I really want to, I'm going to try to get the Joel Pennington guy that's the creator of this on the podcast because I really want to understand more. And I think it's important for him to answer questions like that.
yeah, I'm very interested too. Because I just think about the struggle. Like, if you're a tattooer, you don't know the fight we've had in the background when it comes to regulatory bodies and red bag waste, biohazard waste, and how our trash is not, but how many times they've tried to make it that. But if it's all getting sucked into some bag that's, again, if it is in some sort of mall-like scenario, it's like, have you ever seen Idiocracy?
Yeah.
Oh, remember when he sticks his arm in that machine and it does that barcode on his arm?
Yeah.
And I just remember seeing like the blood and pus that's coming out of the hole. You know what I mean? I just imagine it being like some disgusting, like
Oh, yeah.
festival thing, and so no, it's wild, man. And I definitely am interested to hear too, because yeah, I know that I believe what I understood, and you correct me if I'm wrong, did the Shark Tank didn't award the funding, right? When they were on that
No,
show.
no, because he didn't really have a sound business plan. He didn't,
Yeah, yeah. Which is
and he didn't really have a tested. Um, they've only really done free tattoos in the test phase. You know what I mean? They
yeah,
haven't,
yeah.
they haven't really rolled it out into practical application. And the way I understand
Hmm.
it, they still only have one machine in Texas. They
Hmm.
don't have multiple machines that they can lease to
Sure.
people yet. I have no idea
So
where the hell $7 million went in their project.
yeah,
I mean, that's a ton of freaking money.
that could have done a lot more for the tattoo industry for sure. Yeah, no, because yeah, I know I love the point you hit, and I did see on the video that it showed a little temporary or a little tattoo on some fake skin, and they were saying some of the needles are like hair-like thin, like so. I mean, we know that's going to look like a blob. It's
Right.
literally going to be a blob in their skin, which means that they didn't have the appropriate tattoo experience there. And I'm just imagining that, now that you've shared this, that, if there's been 7 million investments into this and not seeing sort of viable product coming out of it, you couldn't even make it past Shark Tank, right? That could be the potential death of it, which, who knows? I mean, there may be other iterations in the future, but I'd be really interested in hearing the interview from him. But I did find it interesting, though. One of the investors in the Shark Tank, he had stated he spent $300,000 so far in ink, in tattoo ink on his bodysuit,
Oh
and
yeah,
he's
yeah,
getting
Damon.
yeah, and he's getting tattooed by Arlo, and he was saying how one of his tattoos is like 70K, and the other guy's like,
Yeah,
"What?" I imagine that guy that was like, "What?" He's like, "Why am I not investing in this company, this industry?"
exactly,
You paid that
exactly.
much money, so
Yeah,
so that there's hope there that there is truly a demographic of people out there that money is not an object when it comes to good body art, recognizing the value of permanent, you know, mind, body, soul augmenting art on your body. So,
yeah.
like that was kind of that was pretty hopeful. So, but yeah, no, it's wild. Weird.
Well, yeah, and that whole discussion around what people should be charging for tattoos is another one that's been a discussion for
Oh, oh
ages,
my.
right?
Yeah, no.
Ages. I mean, but see, I look at it different. I look at tattooing as art, right? But lots of things are art. A banana duct taped to a wall is art to someone that they'll pay $6 million for.
They would.
I mean, you really can't be pissed at a guy if he's paying, if he's charging a client $70,000 for a tattoo session. I'm sure Arlo has no shortage of clients that want to get in his chair and get tattooed.
Hmm.
Same thing with
Hmm.
other guys like Nico Hurtado or Kat Von
Hmm.
D or
Sure.
anybody. You know what I mean? It doesn't really matter what you charge. If there's a demand for your work, you can charge whatever you want to charge, because
Hmm.
if you don't want to sit in my chair and pay that, there's 5 people behind you that will.
Hmm.
It all
Hmm.
depends on what that artwork is valued to the client.
100%.
That's
Yeah.
it.
Oh, yeah, yeah,
That's what
yeah.
determines value. So this is what I say to artists when we have these discussions. I say, what is your time worth? What do you value your time at? Is your time worth $50 an hour? Or could you be more productive doing something else for $50 an hour? It's really that simple. That's what you should be basing your tattoo rates on. Like, how valuable is my time? Do I want to sell my time for $50 an hour? Nah. My
Hmm.
time's worth at least
Hmm.
$300 an hour.
Yeah. Yeah. No, 100%. Yeah. Yeah. No, and I think about, I was having this discussion, it seems unrelated, but related, how we were traditionally closed Sundays and Mondays, right? It's based off of how tattooing was illegal at certain points in the back of the back of barbershops. But it was always like, I remember coming up, it's like, oh, did you hear such and such is open on Sunday or Monday? Those guys are trying to they're trying to get in on when they're trying to get
Yeah.
business. They're trying to steal our clients when we're taking our days off. Like, what the fuck?
No.
You need to be off when we're off, right? How dare you charge this much money? I'm only charging this much. So, and like people are going to go to you instead of me now, and it's that mentality that what you're trying to say is break out of that shit. And I agree, right? You gotta break out of that because I mean, recognizing that if you're doing $50 an hour tattoo work, you're not going to be able to charge $300 an hour tattoo work, right? You got to raise yourself to that level. But if you've raised yourself to that level and you've proven it and you have the demand, there's no reason why you shouldn't charge that. And when somebody says, "Oh, they're just charging that much is outrageous," that's just a hater hating, right? Like,
Right.
"Oh, well, I can't charge it, so I want to poo-poo on you for charging that."
Right.
Um, and then it gets into ethics and your belief and um, you know I, I there's a point where I enjoy personally not give there's sometimes it's a joy about I almost want to give you this tattoo because it's more of a part of the like it's no longer about this commerce. This is now communication and relationship. But that's because been able to establish good clients that pay well enough to where I can do that. You know what I'm saying? So there's really just kind of it comes into um, getting outside of that illusion that there's us against them, right? Like it's just really when you break outside of that, you recognize that you're the practitioner of an ancient, prestigious craft that can do beautiful things for people. And some people place a lot of value on that and they're willing to pay for it. And if anything, we've seen through the psychology of money, sometimes people need to invest a lot in something so that way they feel like they're truly getting something out of it. Now, don't quote any of that. None of that's like, none of that is like a way to base anything. But to your point, right? It is what is your value worth? And if you have people demanding of it, and you're able to charge it, and you're giving them the best product, and the ethics are there up front, and you truly care about your clients, and you want to give them the best service, I'm all for it.
Yeah, I even went and looked up. I wanted to see just how tattooed was Damon John, so I went and looked up. He was actually in Ink magazine. There was an
Oh,
issue of Ink magazine where he's on the cover of it, actually.
nice, nice.
Yeah,
That's
and
cool.
so I went up and looked up some of that stuff and found his tattoos, and I found the supposed $70,000 tattoo, and I
Yeah.
was gonna make a big video on it too, but I was like, you know what? There's 50 million
No.
people out there making videos on this Shark Tank episode. I just
Mm-hmm.
want to research the ins and outs of the black dot thing and really try to understand what's going on there. Um, but maybe it'll be an upcoming article in the Skin and Ink magazine, Business of Tattooing articles or something like that. But well,
Yeah.
let's move away
Yeah.
from that now and let's talk about APT stuff. You know, what's going on with
Mm-hmm.
the
Mm-hmm.
APT? I'm pretty excited about the New Orleans show. I'm excited to be coming there
Yeah.
and meeting
Mm-hmm.
some members. And let's talk a little bit about that and let the listeners know what's going on with that. I think it's important
Sure.
because I think a lot of people aren't very educated on what the APT actually is. So maybe give a little bit of your history with the involvement in the APT and let kind of listeners that might not even be aware of what it is know what it is and just kind of what
Mm-hmm.
your efforts are and where we're trying to do with the APT.
Sure, sure. Well, just a background. What the APT is the Alliance of Professional Tattooists. It is the tattoo industry, I'm sorry, the tattoo practitioners trade organization. We say trade organization because we're predominantly self-employed contractors. We're not employees, which would be then a union. So it is essentially the Tattoo Artists Union, right? And our purpose is to put a voice to those who don't have a voice, or at least not a voice loud enough to where regulatory bodies or corporations have really listened to us over the grand scheme of our more modern version of tattooing, the contemporary electric tattooing. And so it formed in 1992 with some very thoughtful tattooists, including like Pat Sinatra, and then tattooists like Sean Anderson came in the year of, and other pivotal artists like the late Jack Rudy, Brian Everett, are just a few like high points I can mention. Tons of great tattooists that went into truly trying to safeguard tattooing by educating tattooers. Now, one thing that it isn't the tattoo police. It isn't trying to impose regulations. If anything, it's actually exempt from creating regulations. Actually, not able to via bylaws to propose regulation. Right. Our only I guess stance within that is to oppose regulations that don't make sense and to suggest regulations to regulators, um, set, regulations that make sense. So you know what I mean? Like it's just us. We're like a shield. I like to consider it like visually. The medieval like it's our shield. We're protecting the industry. Now, the reason why so many tattooers wouldn't know, like, hey, this tattoo organization's been around for 30 years. What the hell's it been? It's been working in the background, but because tattooing up till recently was very arduous, not that it isn't now, but even more so. I think a lot of young tattooers today that use, rotaries and pre-dispersed pigments and disposable everything would never know. Maybe like had a whisper that at one point you made everything. Right? You made your ink, you made and soldered your needles, you built your machines, right? You hand stenciled shit, right? Just to do a tattoo was so much more time consuming. I mean, like 10, sometimes 10 times more, right? I mean, quick side note, when I got started, we didn't even have thermal faxes. Like we did everything hand stenciled. So you design something, you slap it on the skin, you realize it needs to be a different size. Well, fuck, come back in 2 hours because I will get that stencil ready, right? So tattoo artists had a hard time keeping up with the times in that technology took off, the tattoo industry took off. Many of the tattoo artists that were still involved with APT are still tattooing on a daily basis and moonlighting for the safety of tattooing, and having a hard time also adapting and even up till recently, honestly, and I'll tell you this is where I come into play, accepting the new generation, right? Some of the older school tattoo artists that are not so much involved anymore were part of we've talked about gatekeeping, we've talked about the older and newer generations, right? But you have just this whole just massive wave of new artists coming in through technology, like meaning Amazon and YouTube, like we talked about, not knowing their ancestors, not knowing their heritage. There just became this lack of communication between those who were there before and those who are here now. And so the APT was still reached out to by governmental agencies, like was still working with the National Environmental Health Association's Body Art Committee, I'm sorry, the Body Art Model Code, the Alliance Association of Food Drug Officials Body Art Committee, right? Still working with the FDA and regulatory bodies, but the tattoo industry and tattoo community and practitioners really didn't pay much attention, unless they had to, right? Unless they were dealing with regulatory bodies. So all that was kind of the way it was, right? That's how the dust had all settled. APT's still doing what they're in the background. The industry is just doing what it's doing and growing and blowing up. And because of that blowing up, there was stuff going on in the regulatory side that started in Europe, where they wanted to impose these very strict regulations on tattoo ink, which they did impose. They're REACH compliant tattoo inks, um, and basically shut down the access of good tattoo inks to the European Union, making a safer tattoo ink, which we know now is not. Um, and all this was taking place. The APT was still, not maybe hands-on directly with it, but navigating it and communicating with those involved with it. And then it slowly but surely crescendoed to December 29th, 2022, when Biden signed the Modernization of Cosmetic Regulation Act, which is to start regulating all cosmetic products. If it can be sprinkled, sprayed, rubbed on, applied to the body for the purpose of beautification in any form or fashion, it's now under this act. And tattooing is now under that. We are considered a cosmetic practice. And they want to, because this part of the industry, the corporations, the blowing up, doesn't communicate with this side over here. Well, you got the government in between going like, well, if we don't have any sort of feedback, we'll go with what the European people are doing, right? And that's where we were like, fuck no, right? Because you're talking about removing 4,000 ingredients from our tattoo inks, which are time tested. We're not having so much sort of health concern. There's like no major issues with it. But if they remove it, they'll have to replace it with something that they are having issues with, right? So we're talking about just devastation to those of us who do tattooing's ability to provide the products we trust, and know that they're going to last long term, right? And so that's when I got really vocal, and right at the beginning of 23, once we learned about this, we saw all that writing on the wall that we were in this bill, just really started putting out the call. And that's what we did, like yourself and those who care about the industry but really didn't know where the APT was, where it was, or if it still existed, or if it existed. But also, we're like so many who have come and heard the call and have come forth. We're already kind of working with their state in some form or fashion, or at least peripherally aware of regulations and laws, and trying to be as ethical as possible, being as professional as possible, and trying to be a bridge between the industry, which I say industry because that's what regulators call us. No matter what we want to say, I'm a craft, I'm not an industry. We are looked at as industry. We're actually referred to as industry. When the FDA says we want to speak to industry, that means tattoo artists, body piercers, manufacturers, permanent cosmetic practitioners. We are industry to them. So that's why I say that. But anyway, they wanted to be a bridge between industry and their local state. And when they found out that, hey, there is this trade organization that exists, that's gaining steam, that has the ability to communicate with the FDA, we saw a massive growth in the organization. And from there, it didn't just keep us on the map with the regulatory bodies. We're still participating with the organizations I mentioned, but it put us on the map for the news media and just the industry as a whole. I think if you haven't heard about it, I'm not saying that your head is completely in the sand, but you at some point you're not paying attention to anything that was going on in your own studio. Because now we're being interviewed by all the major news outlets for anything tattoo related, specifically when you have all of these sensationalist news articles coming out about tattooing and such. So yeah, that's kind of the APT in a nutshell, and it's just continuing to move forward. So
Yeah, that's good. Let's talk about a little bit more about AFDO, and people might not know what AFDO is and how the APT's working with AFDO to kind of work on some of these regulatory conversations.
yeah.
You know, I think that's important to highlight because it's interesting to me being on the manufacturing side and having discussions with other manufacturers in the industry,
Hmm.
how little people, well, some people actually do know about even what's going on in their own backyard related to the manufacturing of their own products. You know, I think
Yeah.
I've been an advocate for regulations for a long time, just from the manufacturing side of things, only because lidocaine's a big one to me. I did a video a while ago on lidocaine and the dangers of lidocaine, and it's a really alarming thing to me in the tattoo space because it's very, while it's an FDA regulated product, it's also a very renegade manufactured product. You know,
Hmm. Hmm.
5% lidocaine is the legal limit by FDA standards, but I go around shows and I see people selling lidocaine based products. Sometimes they're not even aware of how much lidocaine's in the product. They have no education about the drug lidocaine itself or what to tell people, what they should be telling people that are coming up to their booth and possibly buying that.
Hmm.
Because that's a huge liability that you're putting in the hands of an artist. As soon as you take that $20 bill away from an artist and put a tube of a numbing product in their hand, and you're not imparting them with education about how to properly use that product, you're placing a huge amount of liability on that artist without that
Hmm.
artist even knowing that they are assuming that kind of liability.
Hmm.
You know, they just think, oh, my client wants to be comfortable. I heard about these numbing products. Let me go grab one and try it out. But they don't know anything about their client's medical history. They don't
Hmm.
know anything about uh, overdosing people with lidocaine because that's a huge potential,
Oh yeah.
especially if the product's over 5% lidocaine.
Hmm.
I'm serious.
Hmm.
I've seen products out there that are like 10% lidocaine.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And, you know, and
Yeah.
it's
It's dangerous
crazy.
levels. Hmm.
Super dangerous. You know, your client could have a heart attack in your chair, like, and literally at the most extreme case, die.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, granted, we don't have any cases of that, but that's not to say that that can't happen. So I've been
Hmm.
an advocate of regulations for a long time, simply because activity like that needs to stop for the sake of protecting the craft. You know,
Hmm.
for the sake of protecting the artists that these products are being sold to. I don't want to manufacture products that aren't regulated and have some side of oversight. You know, I want to make sure the products that I'm putting out there to the people that are using my products are safe for the people that are using my products, for the clients that they're going on and in.
Hmm. Hmm.
I don't, and anybody that's in our industry just to make a dollar and bypassing the care and integrity that goes into manufacturing products under that kind of scrutiny doesn't belong in the space. That's
No.
my
No.
opinion, right?
Get out. Yeah.
Exactly. So I think
Hmm.
there's far too much of that in the industry. There has been for a very long time. Like you said, you know, I saw a post on Facebook, and I might have even highlighted that, I think, on the APT website a few weeks ago, where there was an artist posting in one of the tattoo groups that he had jars of pigment. He's like,
Oh
yeah, I'm still
yeah.
making my own ink. And if you want to buy some, hit me up in my
Uh,
DMs. And I'm like, no, no, fuck
mm,
no, dude.
hmm. Hmm.
No, no.
Yeah.
What are you doing, man? Bro,
Yeah.
no, stop.
Hmm.
We're not
No,
in that time period anymore.
no, no. I mean, you're right. I mean, I haven't been to your facility. I did get a chance to go and make pigment, or at least do a drawdown and see some of the creation of some Empire blackwash, and then I went to the Eternal manufacturing facility, and that is a far cry because one is kind of a smaller manufacturer and one's a very large, a huge cry from someone's garage.
Yeah,
Somebody's
yeah,
making that shit in the back of their tattoo shop,
yeah.
with blenders, and the level of care, concern, and professionalism that goes into the products we have now. And I'm probably more than confident, almost ensured that your products are to the T when it comes to health and safety and regulatory standards. Um, that's so important because the key thing you said there is liability for our clients. And I'm sorry, liabilities for us. And I think so many tattooers don't recognize that little release form that we have our clients sign, whether piece of paper or digitally. Yes, it is releasing us from liability, but God, man, you get a good enough lawyer, they'll break that shit down. And if we're putting shit that we really don't know in and on our clients, and if something bad happens to them, like we are the most liable, hands down. Like And many manufacturers can wipe their hands of it, like, oh yeah, here's this product, hey, I sold it to them, it was, it's got a label on it, right?
Yeah.
And so I think it's just something we're not apparently aware of and need to take serious. And regulations are good, and I'll explain what I think is good and bad. But just to illustrate your point about the lidocaine not killing anyone, it hasn't yet. There have been heart attacks. There have been other types of side effects where people have gotten hurt because they will, you know, they'll do those gnarly fucking 2 day sessions where they basically have a giant, massive open wound across their back and they'll slather that shit over there and the body freaks the fuck out, right? The heart's like, nope. And you're right. I've seen it too, where people joke. They're like, "Oh yeah, this has like 10, 15% lidocaine." Like, fuck, my doctor can't even get that. So, it may have not happened yet, but look at what just happened recently in the news with that YouTube influencer who died from that anesthesia
Yeah.
tattoo thing. He didn't get tattooed, so we can't say it was, it didn't even get to the tattoo process. And of course, the backstory is he couldn't get it done in the States. He had to go to Brazil because no doctor was like, dude, you got heart issues. We're not going to put you under anesthesia. But he was still hell bent, went out and got it done. So, it's kind of a subjective situation, but it's just an illustration that it's possible. And not less than 6 months, within a 6 month to a year period, the APT was interviewed twice on two news platforms about this becoming a new trend and asking our opinion. And we're like, no, don't do that. Like, that's like, first off, no one can afford it, unless you're extremely wealthy. But there is a danger to anesthesia. You could die, and I feel, super sorry for the family, my condolences and everything. It's not one of those like I told you so, but it just illustrates that it's only a matter of time before somebody does do a massive double sleeve chest blackout session, slather lidocaine, the person dies, right? And the next
Yeah.
thing you know it, and people don't recognize it. Then it's like it's not going to be about the client or the artist and the little situation. Next thing you know, is tattoos are killing people, right? Like it'll get into that level, right? People take
Yeah.
and they snowball it and turn it into something that it really isn't. So really something to be mindful of. And regulations are helpful. And just like everything in the cosmos, brother, it's like everything has to have balance, right? We don't want to be over-regulated, of course, but we need some regulation, right? We need to find that balance between the industry coming and meeting the regulatory bodies, coming together and finding something that works. And the MOCRA does have some of that. And for those who maybe had heard my initial cry to today, right? The initial cry was like, no, no, all of it's evil. Because I didn't know, right? I didn't get to go talk to all the manufacturers. I didn't get to know all the perspectives, and because after that was like 2 years of just traveling and learning, and from the regulatory side to the industry side and the manufacturers, tattooers. And yes, there are some, those I mentioned yourself, Eternal Empire, some that I've been able to hands-on see that they care about the quality of their products. I know from experience that there are manufacturers out there that need to stop manufacturing, right? Because they are putting out shit that could harm people, and it is only a matter of time. And there are things in the MOCRA that are helpful to help mitigate that. And the ones that I do agree with, and I'm sure every tattoo artist will agree with this. We want to know what's in our products, right? Ingredient lists. Everything should have an ingredient list. Like, we need to know what this shit is. Just as something as simple as if it has something that could just cause mild allergies to our clients. But
Right.
we got to know, right? Ingredients listing is paramount. And in conjunction with those ingredients listing, another requirement is lot number recall. We know that things go out in batches, whether it's tattoo ink, aftercare salve or whatever, right? A batch of second skin, right? It's all got to have a lot number, so we can be like, all right, we're seeing all these instances with this lot number, pull it back, right?
Right.
It's not like the old days where you made one batch and you knew that it was Bob, Joe, Sally, and Sarah that got it done. You can go pull it from them, or stop making that. We need that. So ingredients listing and lot number recall. Good manufacturing processes, right? Like, do you do it? Are you operating, outside of your garage, right? Are you doing this in a facility that makes sense for this production? Just like many tattoo artists can't operate outside of a licensed establishment specifically for tattooing, you shouldn't make products outside of a facility to make products, right?
Right.
And again, this just makes sense, to cut down on something as simple as cross contamination. Now, the one thing where we got to meet in the middle is safety substantiation. And this is something that, so many people need to recognize is that there's never been this agreement like these inks are okay for tattooing and these inks aren't, or these ingredients are and these aren't, right? It's like you have from antiquity things we've been using and have worked. And then you have the regulatory body saying, we see all this stuff, we all see these bad issues, we don't know what is causing these things. So we need to come together and say like these work, these don't work, right? And we go and have that communication so that way we can create these ingredients that like yes, you can use these and you can't use these. But because there's still so much miscommunication here and the potential of using European regulations there, that's where safety substantiation can be the one part that I'm still curious how it's going to move forward. And we're that's still an ongoing conversation. And you mentioned AFDO. This is something to be mindful of with this new presidential administration. And I don't know if this even made it to yours yet, Rob. They're pulling funding out of everywhere.
Oh yeah.
They're, Doge is just
Oh
pulling
yeah.
money out of everything. I mean, they're like just defunding the FDA. And, there's a lot of stuff that was, needs to be deregulated, but they are definitely pulling back what they could do for body art regulation. And that can be twofold, like people think, oh, sweet, now they won't be able to regulate it. No, that means they won't have the manpower or the desire to try. So they're just going to adopt what's already there, like the European Union standards, right? So that is still a concern and an issue, right?
Yeah.
And the tattoo industry, because things have kind of calmed down, like anything government related moves at the pace of molasses. So we don't really see like you can't. It's not like a parade where you can watch it go by. It's like if you were at a governmental parade, you'd be standing there for 10 hours wondering when something's going to happen, right? You get bored and you leave. And that's what's going on is like all this deliberation is happening. So people think nothing's happening, but it's going to, by the end of this year alone, there's going to be some major shifts to what's allowed in our products.
Well, I think in some cases you're right, but if you look at it on the opposite side, you said it's like molasses, but it's not like that everywhere under this new administration. I mean,
Mm-hmm,
Trump is
mm-hmm.
putting people in places like Pam Bondi and John F. Kennedy Jr.
Yeah,
and they're laser focused on their areas and like they're tasked
yeah.
with making very fast and rapid changes to these certain areas. John, change the food, get the food cleaned up. Pam,
Mm-hmm.
get the FBI cleaned up or whatever. Pete Hegseth, get the Pentagon and the military cleaned up. It's just like there's going to be somebody like that appointed to the seat of the FDA too, and they're going to have the same directive. Hey, you need to go out and get the FDA cleaned up, and I don't care how you do it. And you might be right. It may be just a simple thing where it's like, hey, Europe's already figured this much of it out. Put that in place over here. And it's interesting to talk about ink specifically because I've also been to the Eternal facility. I was there with Tramp, some 3 years or 4 years ago when they were actually still building that place. It was
Wow.
probably about 80% completed when I was there. I went in there before. I mean, they were still pouring the floor in there, so I saw that place when it was just brick walls erected, and I don't even think the elevator was in there yet. But I know, I don't speak lightly about other ink companies because I have an ink company, but I can tell you that ink companies like Eternal are out there doing the right things. They're making products under the right conditions. They're pouring time and energy. They've got Sean Brown heavily involved in regulations and compliance, and Sean's going to meetings with regulators and being a voice for the industry and trying to make sure that he's doing his part to protect the integrity of the products that they make. So I'm thankful for people like that in our industry. And I'm also I feel like I've gotten so educated myself on regulations that I could almost be a consultant for other ink companies at this point, and you talk about things like safety substantiation. I've had to put together whole dossiers for Electrum Ink. You know what I mean? So like If you, as an artist, come to Electrum Inc. and say, hey, what's in your product? Let me see your SDS sheets. What are your ingredients in here? I can give you all of that. I don't know that other companies can. In fact, and I know some can't, because you're
Yeah.
right. There are a lot of people still mixing stuff up in places where they shouldn't be mixing stuff up, and they don't care about regulations. They just care, oh, I can still sell my ink today. I'm going to still sell my ink today. So if I could give one piece of advice to any tattoo artist that gives a shit about what you're putting in your client, take the ink you're using, reach out to the manufacturer of that ink, and ask them for all the information they can give you on that product. Because if they can't give it to you within an hour of you asking for it, you might want to think about what you're using, because the ones that can are the ones that are investing the time and the money into making sure that their products are safe. The business of tattooing is brought to you by Electrum Supply, the industry leader in high-quality tattoo supplies designed by artists for artists. Whether you need premium stencil products, top-tier cartridges, or game-changing aftercare, Electrum has you covered with innovative, artist-tested solutions you can trust. Want to elevate your work? Head over to electrumsupply.com and stock up on the best gear in the business. And because you're a listener of the business of tattooing, use code podcast10 at checkout for 10% off your next order. Stay sharp, stay stocked, and stay ahead with Electrum Supply. You know, we could have had product released in Europe 2 years ago under the REACH regulations. I literally just sent our pigments over to Europe, the labs in Germany, to have them tested last week. We're just now going through the process of trying to get REACH compliant inks. And distributors have been hounding us for REACH compliant inks for 2 years. And I'm just like, we're not there yet. I'm not comfortable with where they are. I'm not going to put those out in the marketplace. They haven't been tested long enough. We haven't seen how they look in the skin after a long enough period of time. I'm just not going to stake the whole reputation of my company on trying to make money on a product that I'm not comfortable putting my name on. You know what I mean? So we're finally there. We had to overcome that green and blue pigment ban. You know, that was the longest part of it. I mean, that takes away a lot of your palette when you can't use those pigments anymore.
Yeah.
And so we found what we would consider suitable replacement. We've tattooed with them. We've seen them in the skin after 18 months, and we're pretty good with where they're at. You know, now it's just a matter of getting them through the government testing to deem them safe for consumer use. And if they are, then we'll release them in small batches over there, and we'll start getting some feedback from artists over there in regards to how they feel like they perform. But I don't get good feedback on REACH inks from over there. You know, the companies that have released them, I don't think the artists have been really pleased with the performance of them, you know? So,
No.
and it's a tough situation to be in, especially if you're an established ink brand that's already been selling ink in the European space for 10, 15, 20 years. And a large portion of your business is based on those European ink sales. I mean, to just automatically have the European Union come in and say, hey guys, you can't use this anymore. You need to come up with something different. Well, that just means you took away what, 40, 50, 60% of my sales? I mean, that could cripple a company.
Yeah.
So I get it. It's a tough situation to be in, but I'm with you. You know, I don't think we've done a lot of favors for ourselves in regards to trying to do things the right way. And that's not to point the finger of blame at anybody. I mean, it's just the nature of the course. I mean, it's just like you said earlier, it's the evolution of the business. You know, we used to make our own needles. We used to make our own inks. We used to do all of that stuff. Did we sterilize our needles when we made our own needles beyond sticking them in an autoclave? Maybe. I mean, go back and look at old videos. We used to tattoo with no gloves on. You know what I mean? Like, we don't do that stuff anymore because we're smart enough to know that we can't do stuff like that anymore. If we care about our own safety, we're not going to do stuff like that. But we weren't smart enough to know that back then. So it's not fair to point the finger of blame at the manufacturers and say, well, you should have done this or you should have done that, because no, we didn't know that we should have done that. You know what I mean? But we do know what we got to do going forward. And if we care enough, then we're doing things the right way. You know, I don't ever want to get into a situation where somebody from the FDA comes and knocks on my door and says, hey, I need to check out all your stuff. And all of a sudden I've got red mark, red mark, red mark, red mark, and then a padlock's going on my door, and my business is closed down. And for who knows how long it takes me to get all the stuff corrected that I need to get corrected, or maybe I'm getting $500,000 fines, or whatever the
Mm,
case may be. That's not going to be me. You know what I mean? That's
mhm,
not going to be brands like Eternal. I can guarantee you that. You know what I mean? I can't speak
mhm.
for everybody else. It's a little bit scary to me to think about sometimes.
Oh yeah, and I mean in the not too distant past, that happened to some manufacturers where they were quarantined. So we know that's possible and it's happening. And and I mean, I hear you on what you're saying with a lot of the feedback from the Reach products because recently we had just gotten a poll back about the satisfaction or dissatisfaction with a lot of tattoo artists feeling about Reach compliant tattoo pigments and having bad reactions or responses to it. Not just the what does it look like over time because it's still quasi fairly new, right? It's still within a decade of what are these tattooings going to look like in the body and how much of it's falling out, how much is just very watered down and washed out, and then because they had to replace tattoo ingredients with something that's approved but never been tested in the skin. They're having some reactions, and some people have even complained that there have been hospital visits from it. Now, was it from the tattooing specifically, or maybe something with an unsanitary procedure? We don't know specifically, but we just know, like you said, that the general perception of Reach products is not favorable, and it doesn't mean like I'm really hopeful for so knowing someone like yourself that's so adamant about the quality of your products that you do have one that's starting the process that we may move into a realm where there are products that can be adopted by in case we do end up getting saddled with this, you know, reach compliant tattoo pigments from the EU because just as you mentioned this new administration is like boom, boom, boom. And I think of RFK, like I'm all about clean, healthy food. I think our food is poison unless you've gone through and doing the due diligence, just like getting your good quality inks. You got to get your good quality food. But if it's like, if I'm just looking at this paper and this tattoo industry has like we don't have the lobbyists like the food industry does, right? We've got, like you said, Sean Brown,
Right.
and the APT, right?
Right.
With our unfortunately meager financial status compared to a legitimate lobbying company, RFK may go like, well, fuck it, here, boom, just you must use these now because they're accepted there, and it'd be good to know that there are people like yourself out there that are making products that we could potentially trust that are under that, because I do think it is that serious. Now, you did mention like companies like Eternal, yourself, and there are those out there who can afford to navigate these changes, but the majority can't, or majority of them aren't, or they maybe don't care to, right? They may be like, sweet, this is my opportunity to cash out, right? But we think about who can, and at the beginning of this conversation, I briefly touched on PMU doing tiny tattoos,
Yeah.
right? But we also think of what is attached to the PMU realm, right? The permanent cosmetics, the cosmetic realm, right? Like those who have the bajillions of dollars from the makeup industry, right? Those who do have the financial bandwidth and desire, honestly, to be able to make products for the tattoo industry because of the massive demand there. So that's just something that was always kind of a perspective. And I guess maybe even this might be kind of a fun getting your perspective, Rob, on Revlon, Mary Kay. I don't know all the cosmetic companies. I'm sure they're all owned by some parent company, but about them potentially stepping in and making our products because they can. I mean, is that something you see in the not too distant future?
I mean, it's a very real possibility for sure. I mean, it's
Mhm.
definitely one that's kicked around a lot amongst the manufacturing side of things.
Mhm.
They definitely have the money and the resources to be able to do that. They definitely have very intelligent chemists and product development people and engineers and chemical engineers. And I mean, and they have by all, by any logical man's thought process, they probably have very paid for relationships on the regulatory side of things. I mean, they're probably
Oh yeah.
pumping a lot of money into politicians' pocketbooks. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah. Yes.
So they have a lot of leverage that we don't have. You know, I mean, I feel like brands like that could very easily force smaller companies like us out. You know what I mean? That's easy. You know, we're just a little bug on the windshield. The only saving grace that companies like us have is that we're artist owned. We've been in the industry for, you know, I've been in here for now 31 or 32 years now, something like that, 94, 31.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Mm-hmm.
uh, I haven't been making products for 31 years. I've been making products for 13 years, but I'm very intimate with the manufacturing process at this point. I put a lot of passion and energy into making sure that I'm producing quality products. I mean, look, I was going to show you this because you had mentioned, like, I don't know if you can see this, but this is the invoice from CTL in Germany. This is the chemical laboratory that tests the inks for Reach. So you can see right here, you know, this is where I sent my inks over for Reach. This is just the raw ingredients. But
Mm-hmm.
this cost me 12,000 euros to have
Wow.
just to have my ingredients tested. That's no guarantee that my ingredients are going to pass those tests. I have to pay $12,000 just to have them tested. The test results
Mm-hmm.
can come back and they can all fail. And then I've spent $12,000 on ingredients that I can't put into the European marketplace. But the point is, we're paying the money to have that done and do things the right way, you
Mm-hmm.
know?
Mm-hmm.
And I have no problem putting that information out there because I believe in running my company transparently and being honest with the artists that are using our products and proving that we're doing things the right way. I could show you the same things with MOCRA and the FDA where we've registered all of our products with the FDA now at this point. Every
Yeah.
single one of our inks is on the FDA's database. You have to upload every single ingredient that you're putting in the inks.
Mm-hmm.
You have to upload the percentages of them in there. And who knows what they're going to do with that information? You know what I mean? Don't know. They're probably going to compare it to the Europeans' notebook and they're going to say, well, hey, Europe banned all these ingredients, but these guys are still using all these ingredients in the United States. Are they safe? Are they not safe? We don't know where they're going to go with that.
Mm-hmm.
We don't even know where the REACH regulations are going to end up because, like you said, they don't have enough data to really substantiate whether what they've put in place is or is not substantial or valid enough. You know, that stuff's probably going to change 100 times over the next 10 or 20 years, you know, and
Yeah.
ink manufacturers are going to have to constantly shift and pivot to keep their inks in compliance. You know, they could come back 2 months and say, hey, I know we said you guys could use this green pigment in place of this green pigment, but turns out the data is showing that this green pigment's not safe either. Come up with something else.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And eventually things like that, you know, if you have to go through this process where you're paying X amount of dollars every time you got to have a product retested, and you know, and you're not an artist in Europe aren't happy with the pigments that are coming out there and they're subsequently not buying those products, you can't afford to keep doing those tests. Guys that are my size can't afford to keep doing that. And there comes a point in time where you have to be like, hey guys, this isn't viable for us anymore. And that certainly opens the doors for what you just mentioned, these big cosmetic brands to come in because those guys don't even have to pay that. They have laboratories right in house where they can test all this stuff.
Yeah, yeah, no, yeah, yeah, no, it's funny. Well, it's not funny, but one of the things, like I mentioned, once I started to really dig deep into the just everything tattoo related, specifically around the ink realm with Mokra, was just the just level of not only do people didn't know what the APT was, but that the majority of tattoo artists, or so many of them, didn't know that their tattoo products were owned and already owned by corporations, right? You know, so not even knowing who's the those that are actually um, um, the ones behind the manufacturing, right? You know, like it is from just a lack of knowledge and foresight, and because, like you just said, if you don't have these European manufacturers who are able to afford to be fluctuating with these ever changing regulations, and it's hurting them to making them make products that aren't good. That's forcing tattoo artists to buy their tattoo inks illegally, right? And that's something that we have seen as well as tattoo artists still wanting to use the European tattoo artists still use the products that and inks that we're using here in the United States and have to go about it in a legal manner. And I've even heard of artists that, because they're desperate, order their stuff online through, Amazon, or vendors that they can, not reputable vendors, and end up with products that are not even tattooings, right? You have people who are pouring house paint in ink bottles and selling it and just trying to
Hmm.
scam people, right? But that's another example. It's like it's killing smaller, or artist-owned companies, causing illegal activities within potentially are dangerous for clients' health, especially if somebody doesn't know any better and uses some of this kind of fraudulent tattooing on their client. And all that does is spiral backwards to how regulations need to be imposed more rigorously. And all of this could have really have been not maybe not avoided so much as just mitigated by industry participating more, and knowing how to step in and have those conversations with these regulatory bodies to ensure that they know, like, hey, like these things work. We're giving you background. We're giving you feedback that these products we've been using for X, Y, Z, and these things are safe. And have a beneficial, constructive conversation on how to get regulations poised in such a way that makes sense, as opposed to being in the situation we're in right now. And yeah, it is very realistic that we do get saddled with European unions and reach compliant tattooing because of all the money being sucked out of the regulatory bodies, and very aggressive people like I said, RFK in the health realm, that's just like, lopping heads off, just doing what he sees best. So we could be really running towards that. Now I do know, and I know your opinion is uh, maybe not the most favorable. I don't know. I don't know. Like you could tell me. I know that there have been some tattoo artists owned, or at least smaller manufacturers, that are trying to band together a little bit. And you've talked about this before in the tattoo APT space about highlighting tattoo artists owned manufacturers,
Hmm.
just so we know who they are. Because again, a lot of us maybe don't even know, right? We don't,
Yeah,
some may not even know that you were a tattoo artist before, right?
sure.
Or that, love Turtle of Sean Brown, but that they aren't tattoo artist owned. You know what I mean? Like it may look like it, but they're not. So I know that there was some starting to unify, union, come together, at least for the very least. What is your perspective on that, and how can we make that better, or how can we move forward with that? What do you think?
Well, so one thing about my podcast, with this podcast specifically, that I want this platform to be, is a very educational program. So, and again, it's about transparency with me. And I know that that's going to potentially ruffle feathers. You know, recently I wrote that article about education in the industry and how I feel like there needs to be a reform for the entry of aspiring tattoo artists. Do we talk about that a lot? My opinion on that wasn't necessarily very popular with some of my peers, but it was okay because I felt like it ignited a conversation that needs to happen. Same thing on the manufacturing side. There's one thing that I've noticed definitely over the last 13 years, and that is that the actual term manufacturing is very misused in our industry. What does it mean to be a manufacturer by textbook definition, right? That's what I get down to when I talk about manufacturing. Am I a manufacturer? Yes. On some things.
Hmm.
I do manufacture things, but there are degrees of manufacturing. To me, manufacturing at its root level means I make the product from start to finish in house. I am the manufacturer. I do that with some of our products, not all of them. We outsource some of our manufacturing to other manufacturers. In that case, am I still the manufacturer? Not necessarily. Well, what I find a lot in this industry is that there are a lot of people that don't really manufacture any products, but they still call themselves a manufacturer just because they're putting their name on a product that someone else manufactures for them. That's a
Hmm.
problem to me. And
Yeah.
it's a problem for me to band myself with people that are doing things like that and calling themselves a manufacturer in our space, because you're
Hmm.
not really being truthful about what you do.
Yeah, good point.
You know what I mean? That's a struggle for
Hmm.
me. That's a
Hmm.
struggle. Cartridges is a big one, tattoo needles and cartridges. The last article that I wrote in Skin and Ink magazine was specifically around manufacturing of tattoo needles. And that all came about because of the tariffs that are coming into place now, and the fact that tattoo needles are inevitably going to increase in pricing. That's a big conversation that we can have. I think a lot of artists aren't aware that. Now, I can't say this with 100% certainty, but I can say it with nearly 100% certainty. I feel like there are no cartridges that are made in the United States. I feel like they're all made overseas. My challenge to any manufacturer that's listening to this, that's a quote unquote manufacturer of tattoo needles, I would love to see a video of your manufacturing facility in the United States. If someone could show me that, then I'll step back and I'll recant that statement 100%. But I don't believe that anyone can. I can't. My needles aren't made in the United States. But I am a manufacturer to some degree in that space because I control a lot of my manufacturing on those products. I make my own molds. I set the quality standards. I inspect everything that we manufacture and put our names on. Some people don't even go that far. They just see a product. They get an email from some manufacturer overseas and says, "Hey, we can sell you these needles and put your name on them. All you got to do is design this box and show us what you want on it." And they get a shipment of needles in with their name on it, and then they start selling it to people and calling themselves a manufacturer. That's not what they
Hmm.
are. They're just a
Hmm.
reseller.
Hmm. Yeah.
They're a private labeling reseller.
Hmm.
There's a lot of that in our industry. People just aren't aware of that. It's not to say that my needles are better than their needles. That's not the statement that I'm making.
Yeah.
But I'm also want people to be aware of what really goes on. Like I just saw a video, I think it was on the Honest Tattooers podcast, maybe. I listened to that one a lot.
Hmm.
I don't know if it was on that one. I feel like it was, but they were talking about tattoo needles in that are made in China, and they're like, and I'm sure you've heard this a bunch because I hear people say it all the time. Oh, all the tattoo needles come out of 2 or 3 factories in China, and you could just get A, B, or C, and that's what you're getting. There's some degree of truth to that, but not completely. Number one, I don't know if they're all coming out of 3 factories. There could be 5 or 7. I really don't know what the number is. Number two, as if you decided to go and have a product manufactured in China, whatever the product is, you have you have as much control or as little control as you want to have in that manufacturing process. You can take the shelf that you could take the product they hand you off the shelf and say, I don't want to make any changes to that. Just stick it in a box and put my name on it. I'm cool with that. It can be that simple, or you can say, no, I want to totally rebuild that thing. I want to change X, Y, Z about that product. I want it to do this. I want it to look like this. I want it to be this color. I want to make sure it uses these materials. You can get as extensive as you want to be with the manufacturers there, just like you can anywhere else in the world. I mean, you have as much or as little control as you want to have in that process.
Hmm.
Uh, that's the part that I think a lot of people don't really understand or that they overlook. It's not quite as simple as people paint it out to be. So I think you really have to just be comfortable going to your manufacturer and asking for as much information as you can get. And when you start asking the right questions, you can weed out the bullshitters pretty quick. You know what I mean?
Hmm. Hmm. No, no, I appreciate you saying because yeah, I mean, even just that realm, like I was saying, I mean, we don't recognize that many of the manufacturers are corporate owned. Many of us, maybe, I mean, I didn't know there was only 3 to 5 to 7, right? Actual cartridge manufacturers throughout that we get all of our stuff from. And that I mean, it's funny you say it because I even have a local manufacturer. He's in town. He's a tattooer. Has been around forever, but he has his own line of cartridges, and he calls himself the manufacturer. And in your mind, you're just like, oh, cool, he's in the back of his fucking shop making these little things, But no,
Right.
instead he's just being like, I'll order this, put my logo on that. The thing is, I love them though. So I love the cartridges, um, but no, no, I appreciate you sharing that because that's so important for us to know. And especially because of that, because so many of it's predominantly coming from one funneling area, China, and the tariffs are coming, like they're either here or coming, right? That's going to drastically affect things. And I mean, I recall you mentioning in a comment a few weeks, months ago about, you saying tariffs come in and that you will do your best to mitigate that overhead, that cost to us. And I appreciate and respect that. I know for sure there's going to be manufacturers or distributors or resellers or whatever we want to call them who aren't going to take that same stance, right? We're going to see our boxes of needles just, going up. And that's within, you know, I brought this up in a post, right? Just talk about tariffs and it's going to affect the price of our equipment. And it's funny, is so many of them, like the responses I get were like, first off, well, I guess it's time to go back and start making our own needles again. Yeah. And it's like, well, cool. You're the 5% that's around that could still do that. Um, but where are you going to get those ingredients? Where are you going to
Right.
get that needle? Where you get that steel for those needles there, friend? Even the raw materials are still going to probably be expensive. And then so many of them were, it's just like, oh, we have such a high price point already, or we already make so much a profit margin off of the equipment and such. And it's like, well, what are you using? What are you using that it's just such a drastic shift there that you feel like you can still charge the same amount and pay these increased prices? Your profit margin is going to shrink. You're obviously going to translate that to a higher price to your clients, which means you're going to have to, justify why you're increasing your rates to your clients, improve your services,
Right.
improve your customer service skills. But the other part that I thought was really important for people to recognize, especially on the non-ethical resellers, is now you help me delineate manufacturer reseller, right? And it's the resellers we're probably more concerned about. It's like, oh, well, that high quality product that I was using before that's pretty safe and is made with good ingredients that I really like is now too expensive. So I'm gonna actually opt for that cheaper shit that you got, that better price point, so I'm not getting hit so hard with the tariffs. Still put my name on it, still put my reputation behind it or whatnot, but just let that fly, right? And people don't recognize now. It's like I always use these cartridges, inks, whatever, and they felt like they were the same, or they were. It's still the same brand, but I'm getting these weird responses to the tattoo. I get something that people don't see that trickle down, right?
Yeah.
They don't see how that's going to affect everything. Um, and again, what if somebody goes for that like low bar? Like I'm going to go to the factory that's like on the outside of town that you can get for a fraction of the price, and they're like pulling out ingredients off the truck. You know what I mean? And next thing you know, you got this surge of people who got crazy infections or reactions or whatever it is, right? Cracking down. Then you got RFK at us now. Like it's this whole vicious cycle that we can discuss. And so with that being said, with that doom scenario being shared, you did have a very viable um, response to that, is to help us to identify what is a reseller, what levels of reselling and manufacturing are, and the tattoo artist's own versions that are going through as yourself, like the FDA requirements and submitting that. I mean, what is the likeliness of us putting something like that together?
Um, I think it's a possibility. I think it's very possible. Um,
Mhm.
but I think you got to get it right. I think just like with everything that's been tried in the past, if you don't have the right people plugged into it, uh, it's very hard for people to set personal agendas to the side and do what's just best for business. And I think that's always been the struggle with a lot of these things that pop up where people are trying to spearhead initiatives like that. I think you get some people that are very passionate about doing it the right way, and then you open the door to other people that see an opportunity there that could benefit them or their agenda, and then it starts to kind of start spinning out of control, and then the momentum just kind of stops, and people start dropping off,
Yeah.
um, and it becomes stagnant again, and it just goes back to the same thing that we're talking about. If you if you don't get the right people in the right places and you allow those kinds of things to happen, then it becomes very apparent to people on the outside that we're not able to regulate ourselves, that we can't unify ourselves. And that's when things change for the worse for us, you know? So I think it's not a matter of if it can happen. I think it's a matter of it has to happen. And how are we going to make it happen? You know what I mean? Look, it's very dangerous for me to step out and offer my opinions up on specific things. It can be, right? I don't feel threatened in that regard right now. Just like education or talking about regulations, I don't have anything to hide or fear by doing that. But I also realize that it can rub, you know, it could cause some tough conversations for specific people. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
it could shine a spotlight on people that don't want a spotlight shined on them. And if I'm the catalyst of that, then, you know, that could have a repercussion towards me. But at the same time, I feel like there has to be some people bringing things to the surface and talking about things. Because if you don't, what happens? What's the bigger consequence of that? It goes far beyond just my personal consequence. It has a far wider, broader reaching consequence if people aren't doing those things. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Like I mentioned, that whole spiral of if we don't say something to allow those who are doing it improperly to continue to keep doing it improperly, and then that has ramification, comes back to, increased regulations, come back and just it degrades the entirety of everything, right? And then it just makes it to where it's overregulated. And I mean, I just imagine the crappy place the European artist is in. And I've heard about it, right? Where just they are mandated to use a product that they don't want to use. Like they don't want to use it, but they have to use it. And I have a screenshot showing reach compliant consequence. Basically, like you're talking like 50,000 euro fine for
Mm-hmm.
getting caught using our products, up to 3 years in jail. You know what I mean? Like that's some serious shit. That's keeping people. I mean, I'd talk to artists that wouldn't like they would tell me these stories, but they wouldn't go on camera what they were talking about, they would keep all their reach compliant inks out, like visibly. Like, this is what I use. But when they go to tattoo, they're in there reaching there, grabbing their American products or non reach compliant. So much so that one of my chats with the European artist said that the whatever regulatory body, the health departments in their area would actually come and bypass the ink bottles and go right for the ink, right? Like go to take samples of the ink.
That was
And
in
it's
their
like,
that was in their caps on their workstation.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, and going in and to,
What are
to,
they
to see what
actually
they're
using?
actually. Exactly. And so that, I mean, that just causes fear and anxiety, and that just kind of compounds that illegal activity. Like we talk about, even like no one did anything about the regulations. No one like, oh fuck it. Like, well then if we got to use this shit, then we'll just bypass it, get the illegal stuff. Well, then you just cause this illegal activity, and then you're causing these consequences for these artists. And again, if you're scared to operate now, you're going to not tattoo professionally, right? It's going to end up in your house or somewhere illegally, right? Or they're going to quit altogether, right? So we don't want to be in that same situation, and it does require us to really point at those things we don't want to point to. But like I think the worst thing to do is to like, hey, look what Bob's doing. Bob's doing something bad. Look at Bob, get Bob. Because that does nothing but cause Bob to react in a way that's not beneficial, right?
Right.
I think the most important way, and this goes even to like when artists join the APT and are like, man, we ain't got no regulations in my area. We need to have regulations in this area. And it's like, yes, but we don't want to give all of that control to the government. Like we don't want to give it away. We want to step up to that level, right? And not where we become self-regulating like police. We become self-educating, right? I
Right.
think that's the biggest caveat. And you've dropped some little nuggets in this interview right now. Like, if you are curious as to the quality and safety of your products that you're using, go ask your manufacturer. You should be able to say, "Show me what's in my product. Show me what's in my ink. Show me what's in my skin. Show me what's in my where are you getting your needles." And if they can't respond in a fashion that's agreeable and satisfying, or they bypass it or dodge you, that's a sign. Ah, okay. So if you have enough artists going like, I'm going to XY, I'm going to Bob's, tattoo supplies, and he can't answer us, well, then let's stop going to Bob. So Bob's gonna be like, well, fuck. Like it wasn't one person that did this. It was just an increased amount of people becoming displeased with my product. So now I need to either change or get out. And this goes with tattooing. That's what I always tell. If you educate the clients of what a professional tattoo artist looks like, whether they have the appropriate licensure for that area if it requires it, or simple things like you go in and they don't have any porous surfaces, right? Like you go in and a tattoo shop has carpet and fabric everywhere, like they've done no
Red
bloodborne
flag.
pathogens training. Like, right? Like if it smells like a cigarette and green soap, like man, they haven't done any cleaning. Like,
Yeah.
and
If they
and
got
this is
porno
gonna,
mags on the table in the lobby, it's probably a bad sign.
yeah, right. Oh goodness, I mean, for reals. I mean, like in just
Yeah.
those little things, like where you treat it professionally, where you're not. And this will help the marketplace bear them out. And Brian Everett has said this multiple times, and I respect him. I consider him a friend and a mentor in our industry because he is heavily involved with everything we've been talking about. He always says the cream will rise, meaning he's been around, right? Where he started off in the knuckle banging era. To I worked for Jason Willis at one point, who had worked for him but split off and opened a shop, and for years he was scared of Brian because he thought Brian was going to come break his hand. But
Yeah.
eventually they came together because Brian got older and wiser, and but he saw that like going from like the tattoo shop to like so many around us. It's like you can't get held down by that. You just got to keep elevating yourself and educating those around you, so those who can grasp on that knowledge can rise with you, right? And then those who don't rise with you, well then, that's for them. Like I think it's so important for them, like, oh, I can't survive in this. I need to get out. Or, you know what? I really want to be here. I'm gonna rise as well. I think that's the most I think the most effective way that the industry is going to improve is just we
Yeah.
all keep elevating ourselves, whether we're tattooing, manufacturing, reselling, whatever it is, educating, just keep rising it. And that's ultimately, who's going to be there when the smokes settle after this year, right? Who's here in 26 is probably going to be here in 2030 and beyond because they've been able to navigate what happens in our industry. This, right?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, you're right. I like that. I like that analogy that the cream will rise. I haven't really heard it put that way, but I like that because I think that's a very accurate way to look at it. I do. Especially seeing the things that I see out in the tattoo world on a daily, weekly, monthly basis. Um,
Hmm. Hmm.
I say it all the time. I was talking to Troy at Eternal this weekend at the Chicago show, and I said, I really don't think there's going to be very many ink companies out here in 10 years. Like, I just think there's going to be a few of us. Like, I think a lot, and I think that way about a lot of product manufacturers. I think a lot of them are going to disappear just by attrition. Like, they're they're not going to be able to to afford to go through the regulatory process. They're not, it's like I think about like stencil products, for example. Like I was just having this discussion with somebody last week because oversaturation is a big hot topic in my world, right? Like
Hmm.
when I developed Electrum stencil primer, there was only one other product on the market, and it was stencil stuff, and that's what I was using as an artist. But I developed Electrum not because I wanted to take a piece of stencil stuff's market share. I didn't even set out with the intent to mass produce a stencil product. I just needed something that worked better for me in my process as an artist. Because I found when I was getting into sessions that were in excess of 4 or 5 hours, I was losing my stencil, and stencil stuff just didn't perform the way I needed it to. And
Hmm.
so I set out to just make something better that worked for me in my studio. And then I started letting other artists use it. And they were all like, oh my God, this stuff's great. And then I sent it to my buddy out in Oregon who had an ink company at the time. It's not there anymore. and he used it, and he went and ranted and raved about it. And he was like, dude, you need to do something with this. This is like a revolutionary product. Like other artists should be having access to this. And that's kind of how that all took off, right? But now when you look at the market today, I don't even know how many freaking stencil products. I mean, there's got to be fucking 70 of them. I see new ones popping up all the time. It's crazy. And in my mind, I'm like, you can't possibly improve a product 70 times over. It becomes a point in time where you've just diluted the pie and the marketplace so much, it's not profitable for anybody anymore. And what's the point of it at that point? It's the same thing with aftercare. You know, people come to me and they're like, oh, I got an idea for a new aftercare. I'm like, are you going to do it better than Richie Bulldog's doing it with Hustle Butter? Because if you're not, why? Why even try? That market is already diluted so freaking much. Like, why would you go into that space? You know what I mean? For what? How could you possibly make a product that's any different or any better than 50 other products that are out there? Explain it. Because if you're not improving it, why are you doing it?
Yeah, that's such a good question, and you're right. I mean, I didn't know there was 70 of them. Like, and they're probably coming and going. They'll be gone before the end of the year. You know what I mean, kind of thing. So it is like, I mean, it's the same thing with the amount of tattooing, right? And like you said, you keep making a good product that works really good, and that's all you got to do, right? And keep focusing on getting in the hands of the right people, and all the other ones are just going to eventually evaporate. I mean, it does require you to still be relevant. And the same relationships required between a tattoo artist and a client of good customer service skills and making them feel it's the same thing. I'm sure a manufacturer, as a manufacturer, you need to is make sure that the clients still, or your clients, the tattoo artists, right, still are feeling appreciated, and that the product that they're using is ethical, and that it's moving forward in the future and isn't just a money grab from someone else. Yeah.
Yeah, I used to think the value of a brand was how much revenue the brand could develop. You know, how much revenue could the brand generate? How much saturation could the brand penetrate? Right. And that's just strictly from a business perspective way of thinking about things. Right. And I think about, I attribute that to brands like, outside of the tattoo industry, just any brand, like Estee Lauder or cosmetic brands or just food brands, like Oreo cookies, for example. How does Oreo cookies compete in a space with 50 other cookie brands? This is not like a thing that's just exclusive to the tattoo industry. It's like
Yeah.
this everywhere. You go to the tire shop to get new tires for your car. You got 10 or 12 different brands of tires, Bridgestone, Goodyear, Pirelli. I mean, what's different between all those tires? Who really knows, right? What it boils down to is what is the best quality product out there and what offers the most benefit. I don't think the value is in how much product you can add to your product line anymore. I think the value is in what the value is to the consumer. That's where the value in a brand comes into play. It's like Louis Vuitton, right? Like, why is someone willing to go pay $4,000 for a Louis Vuitton bag when you can essentially get the same or a damn near very close rival bag that doesn't have that name brand on it for 50, $60? Really, what's the difference between those brands? You know what I mean? That's how I think about things in today's landscape. Because everything's so price driven. Everything is so price driven in the marketplace today. I mean, God, dude, I buy clothes off of Temu and freaking, these freaking shopping apps now. And I know this stuff's all coming from China, but dude, I'm not going to go to the mall and spend $100 on a pair of Banana Republic jeans. You know what I mean? Like, for what?
Yeah.
Why?
No. Yeah. Yeah.
I
No.
don't
Yeah.
care that much about a name brand. You know what I mean? I just don't care. I just care that it's comfortable, and that's it.
Sure. Sure. Yeah. Yeah. No. Yeah. My buying habits the same. I buy like this is our local powerlifting gym, and I'm wearing some pants that probably had way beyond their lifespan. But you're right. It is about really what's the best quality, what's the best value you're getting out of it. And I think that's just something, again, we kind of started this conversation off about, weird paradigm shifts. And I think as a population, I see this in the Gen Z, right? And I saw a little bit in my kid brother. He's a zillennial, right? And now this newer generation where because of the amount of information that's being bombarded on us, and then just the awareness of the breakdown in the authority structures, that we are becoming aware of, like, oh yeah, it is a fucking money driven grab for bullshit. You're paying, fucking 50 times more for something with a logo on it when you can get it for a fraction of the price. But then both, you talk about buying stuff from China. I'm trying to also be aware of, like, how many poor children are making my clothing, right? Like, I don't need to keep buying things because I know I'm going to be continuing to improve, increase human slavery, which is a totally different conversation.
Yeah.
But you know what I'm saying? Like, I think this newer generation, although we can all complain about work ethic on different levels, the knowledge, the awareness is there, right? And I think that's probably has a lot to do with it. Like, why work hard into a system that is breaking apart, right? I think it is time to rebuild systems, and I think the foundation of those systems is to stop being involved with a system and start looking in ourselves and finding that accountability within ourselves to improve every situation that we're in and everything that we're engaging in as ethically as we can. Looking to more altruistic objectives, and then also looking to each other as a peer, as a fellow person in the same boat. You know what I mean? And not looking at people what you can get at them, but what you can give to them. Right? I think that's the big paradigm shift right now. Is like we have to. And we'll just go back to tattoo industry because this is very germane. Is start working together, start communicating with each other, start educating each other, and start education in, like, sharing truths, but like being like, we have to be the ones who are the ones that are the first to the door, right? Like, we're the ones that are going to take the most bullets whenever we're trying to be a part of this paradigm shift. But being vulnerable with people and telling them truth and being honest with them and telling them what we know, we don't know. Tell them when we do know things and we don't know things, and to point people in a direction that's always towards a higher truth. To just keep trying to raise that cream, just to be a
Yeah.
part of that. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
That's our only option, because if we're trying to, like you said, look at things as the traditional uh, um, um, consumerist, capitalist way of things, that's a sinking ship that's going away, right? Like, that's obviously not a viable long-term strategy. And I mean, just our world is weird because of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Yeah. And it's a weird place to be too, Ben, because, you know, there's a million ways that you can look at and break down a problem, and within every problem, you can find 10 more problems that you have to solve.
yeah, yeah,
The more you start peeling back the layers of the onion, the more things you start to uncover and the more truths you start to uncover behind specific things. But every one of those truths requires another answer. You know what I mean? And so it's really about how far do you want to dive in to learning about specific things. I did an extensive study on what it would take to manufacture needles in the United States. I've written a complete and entire business plan on it. I've figured out what it would cost to start the process. The price of needles would have to raise by 60 or 70% to manufacture needles stateside.
wow,
I
wow,
don't believe that our industry can support that. I don't see that ever being a viable option for us. Like,
mm-hmm.
I just don't think it's going to happen, especially when you have platforms like Amazon where you can go and buy stuff direct from Chinese manufacturers. Do you think if I started manufacturing needles in the United States, I would have to secure at least 80% of the needle business in the world to sustain the startup cost of that? You know what I mean? To
Mm-hmm.
justify the startup cost. There's no way I'd be able to do that. And even if I did that, China's not going to be like, oh shit, guys, we can't make needles anymore. This guy put us
Yeah,
out of business. He opened a manufacturing facility in the United States. We're all fucked. That's never going to be a reality. You know what I mean?
mm-hmm.
So as much as I would love to see that, and as much as I understand the poisons of third world country manufacturing, I it's what I'm talking about when you start peeling back the layers.
Yeah.
Okay, great. We
Hmm.
solved this problem, but we didn't do anything to eliminate this problem. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
So it's like it's a very very tricky slope to walk on. And what do you do? Where is the win? You know what I mean?
Hmm.
I don't have the answer to that today. I wish that I did.
Yeah.
I I wish there were enough people here that would say, "Oh yeah, no problem. I'll pay 70% more for needles." But it's not. The reality is that's not ever going to be a thing that happens. Like there's not. It's
No.
just not going to happen.
No. 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 And I appreciate you saying that because I mean, um, not to get off on a tangent with something else, but like, have you heard about the Hadron Collider, right, where they smash atoms together? Are you familiar with this, right? And they
Yeah,
keep breaking them down. And the whole idea
yeah,
is to try and get down to smaller and smaller to try and find what is the most fundamental level of subatomic particles. And we can't find it. We actually keep getting smaller and smaller and smaller. And they say if you talk to one of these atom smashers or a quantum physicist, right, you better be versed in their dialogue. Otherwise, they will seem like a crazy person.
right.
And just to illustrate your point, as soon as you break down one problem, you're going to find there's 10 more problems. You break down that problem, there's going to be 10 more problems. And you know, you could find yourself going into this insanity loop where you're trying to fix things that it's just going to always be a non-stop, a never-ending problem. You know, and I think the biggest thing we have to recognize is that, you know, we're always going to want to try and satisfy ourselves with, you know, like the best, you know, for a tattoo artist, I'll use that example. Is like, you know, I want to be the best tattoo artist and charge the most money, and I want to have the most recognition. I want to do the best tattoos, and you know, like these are very altruistic goals to head towards, but we'll never get there. And if you attain them, or at least temporarily, it's only going to be satisfying for a temporary amount of time, right? Before you then peel back and find another problem. And that's, I think, ultimately because we have to forego the thought that we as individual beings can find satisfaction as individual beings. The only way we're going to find true, lasting satisfaction and peace in our reality is by recognizing we're all one in this, right? And to work together with this, even with those who are doing it wrong. Like we got to recognize that, hey, they too are just subject to whatever the heck it is that they, you know, brought them to that realm, right? You know, that they themselves were somehow wronged and they're just perpetuating that, right? And when we can start to forgive and start to recognize this and start to work together and educate each other and lift each other up, um, those problems will then no longer really be there because we're not digging into them. We've kind of headed our consciousness in a direction that is about unification and improvement. And it's not going to be easy, and it does require some of us to really let go of the things we thought we wanted. But honestly, we're just, you know, at a fundamental level, man, we are just energy, and we try to consume these dense things, which is just it's like ash in our mouth. You know, it's ultimately not going
Yeah,
to have some true satisfaction. What really is going to satisfy is lifting your brothers, sisters, friends up, right, and helping see things improved. And for us as temporary beings, when we do finally leave this industry and this world, then we just hope that we left it better in some
right,
way, you know,
right.
than when we came to it. So
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you your time today. I do want to wrap
yeah,
this up just by throwing out a little bit of information on how people can learn more about the APT, and also
yeah,
just real quick touch base on what's going down at the New Orleans Tattoo Convention for
yeah,
anybody that
yeah.
might be in attendance there.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, so the New Orleans Tattoo Convention, October 2nd through I'm sorry, the 3rd through the 5th. It's going to be New Orleans. It's going to be the um,
Bill and Art
Villain Art
Show.
Show. That's going to be this year's annual APT conference. That's where all APT members are welcome to come attend. Even if you're not a member and you're interested, still come check it out. So we're going to have we're going to have more elections. We're going to have our open public meeting. It's an opportunity to really engage with us and have those in-depth conversations, build friendships, come together with those who are truly of that community mindset. Definitely suggest you get the rooms now. They're smoking good deals right now if you get them while you can. So, I mean, I want to say like less than $200 for the whole weekend for your rooms. So those are going to go fast. So if you are interested,
And good
now.
seafood in New Orleans too. So if you like
Yes,
food, that's just
looking
an excuse
forward.
to come by itself.
Right, right. I'm looking for some Cajun. I mean, I'm going to bring my whole family. We're going to go try and check out some ghost tours and stuff. So it should be a good time.
You been to New
And
Orleans before?
no, this will be my first
Oh
time.
yeah,
So
it's great.
we're excited to go and check it out. So, but if you want to learn more about the APT, go to safe.tattoos.com. I'm sorry, safe-tattoos.com. That's the APT's website. You can find out more information there. Of course, APT on Instagram. And then if you want to find out more about what I'm sharing, you can go to Ben Shaw Archetype on Instagram or benshawarchetype.com. Again, ways to connect and be able to kind of point you in the right direction. Because if I don't know, I'll send you to people like, like Rob, who know more about his realm of excellence. So, thanks for having me, brother.
Yeah,
I'm
dude, I
happy to be
appreciate
here.
you being on the Virgin episode, and I
There we
think it
go.
went down good, and I think we talked about a lot of good stuff here, and so I'm excited
Yeah,
to get this out there and keep it going, man. So I appreciate your
heck yeah.
time.
Of course, appreciate you,
I'll
brother.
see you in New Orleans, brother.
See you there.
All right, man.
Mhm.
That's a wrap for this episode of The Business of Tattooing. I appreciate you tuning in and being part of this journey to level up the industry one conversation at a time. If you found value in today's episode, do me a favor. Subscribe, leave a review, and share it with another artist who could use this knowledge. Got questions or topics you want me to cover? Hit me up on Instagram at NoFlashNinja or email me at rob@electrumsupply.com. And remember, tattooing is an art, but running a successful business is a skill. Keep pushing, keep learning, and I'll catch you next time on The Business of Tattooing.